Podcast, TruthSeekah Podcast. Buckle up, everyone. We're going to talk aliens, UFOs, ghosts, spiritual and paranormal. From all of the three moons, beyond your wildest dreams. Nice.
TruthSeekah and or its affiliates are not responsible for any strange phenomena that may occur during or after listening to this podcast, which may include the following: heightened senses of awareness, psychic abilities, UFO sightings, alien contact, time loss, out-of-body experiences, ringing in the ears, ESP, lucid dreaming, increased synchronicities, astral projection, telepathy, stronger intuition, levitation, miraculous healings, and or remote viewing. Please be advised to listen at your own discretion.
Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away? To a place to walk on troubled seas, faith to stand when I don't believe. I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come?
You are now locked into the TruthSeekah Podcast.
Gargoyles! Psychics! Everything's ungodly! Dark savage!
Streaming live at TruthSeekah.com.
She's not a Christian!
Give it up, y'all.
Your portal to the paranormal, esoteric, and all things spiritual.
She's tampering in dark-sided stuff!
And now, your host, TruthSeekah.
Hey, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? I'm your host, TruthSeekah. This is the TruthSeekah Podcast, man. Excited and delighted to be with you guys again today for another amazing episode where we dive into all things spiritual, leaving no stone unturned. It's going to be a good episode. Make sure you guys stay tuned. I want to say a huge thank you to all of the Patreon supporters. This is a listener-supported and funded show. Thank you guys for believing in the work and being co-creators with me and bringing this material to the masses, man. You guys are awesome. Give a shout out to some of the latest patrons within the last week or so. Shout out to Abigail Squires. It was good to meet you on the School of the Mystics, my friend. My friend Natani Ag, thank you for joining as well. Sharp Eswali, thank you for joining. And Cody Richardson, man, you guys are awesome. Thanks and welcome to the fold. If you'd like to support, head on over to patreon.com/TruthSeekah. There you get access to my entire discography of music. It's 200 plus songs. All of the new stuff that I'm working on is available there as well before it's available to the general public months ahead of time. You also get access to exclusive interviews, clips, behind the scenes stuff, and our Thursday night School of the Mystics, which is the community base to what we're building here on the back end as far as guided meditations, tapping in through prayer, just discussion, man. Just having a community of people that you can roll ideas off of and talk to, because that's what it's about. And I think recently, too, our Discord server is available, too. So the Discord servers are for patrons only as well. You get access to all that stuff. Check it out. My guided meditations, all of that stuff is there. Patreon.com/TruthSeekah. Also, if you have not had a chance to check it out yet, check out my book, Spirit Realm, Angels, Demons, Spirits, and the Sovereignty of God, forward by the man himself, Jordan Maxwell. Got to get him back on soon. It's available at Amazon, or you can just go to TruthSeekah.com and check it out there. Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump into today's discussion. My guest today is Brendan Murphy. Brendan, welcome to the TruthSeekah Podcast, man. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm waking my brain up. It's about 1:05 here in the morning, but I'm going to hang in there with it, and yeah, we'll have a good chat, I'm sure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, definitely, man. So, waking your brain up, hacking the brain and things like that, looking over your work, it seems like you know how to do that. It shouldn't be a task for you.
Yeah.
Biohacking and ways to make the brain fire and stuff.
Yeah, man, absolutely. That's what I'm all about. So, Yeah, getting out of bed, not my strong suit, but helping other people wake their brains up and DNA activate and all that sort of fun stuff. Definitely, it's definitely on the menu.
So it's 1 a.m. where you are, right?
Yeah, that's right.
You in Australia?
Yeah, east coast of Australia. I don't know if you've been to Byron Bay, but the Byron Bay Shire.
For sure. I haven't been there, but we've got a lot of listeners in Australia who join us, so that's pretty cool. So definitely, if you're doing anything as far as workshops or physical stuff over that way, make sure you plug that, because I'm sure we'll have some people that want to link in with you for sure.
Yeah, thanks. Awesome.
So let's just...
I'll let you know.
For sure. Let's just hear a little bit about the genesis, man. Like what got you into spirituality, and so all of the really cool things that you bring to the table. Like, I like to hear the genesis first. Like, was it any childhood experiences when you was a kid that made you ask the bigger questions in life? Was it one near-death experience? Like, what was it that got you into asking the bigger questions in life?
Yeah, fair question. I guess it's fair to say I had a philosophical streak for as far back as I can remember. I just had that element of the personality that's curious, the wonders about things, the purpose of things, what's it all about. So, if you skip forward until I was about 19 going on 20, I have a younger brother who was at school, and I had finished school. I think I was probably maybe my first year of study at the Institute of Music. And he came home from school one day and he said, we had this guy come in as a guest. He was a guest speaker, and he was talking about he was talking about business. He was an entrepreneur, and he was supposed to talk about business, but he was talking about this book called The Holographic Universe. And you might know it yourself, quite a popular, pretty well-known book. And he just said, I don't know why, but I feel like, you might be interested in checking that out for some reason, which was definitely, an unusual event that he would actually come home with a book recommendation for me. So, it stood out to me, and I thought, I'll put that in the back of my mind, and I'll come back to that. So that's what I did. I kept that there for about 6 months or so before I acted on it. And when I did, I went and tracked down the book and I read it. And that was the beginning of the end, in a way. It was the beginning of the beginning. It just blew my mind, and it showed me that my model of reality until that point had been severely distorted and severely limited. And that was where I became a seeker, if you like, a seeker of truth and a disseminator as well.
What year was that? How old was you?
I think I was 19 to 20, so about 2003.
Wow. Nice. So you've been in it for a while. I was noticing there's a lot of people who got into a lot of this stuff around 2012. Did you see a boom or a shift during that time in your own life?
Not in my immediate sort of surroundings that stood out to me, but I know it was a time, that was definitely active, and I think it's just increased ever since then. And now we're seeing another exponential increase because of the pandemic. Yeah, definitely. People are into conspiracy theories and asking the deeper questions now more than ever. It's interesting too, because you see them getting caught up and getting freaked out and stuff. But that's kind of part of the process for a lot of people when you find out that whether it's the spirit realm or that the people that we've put our trust in the government or in the religious systems or whatever, don't have the best intentions in mind. When you find that out, that's kind of heartbreaking early on. Yeah, it is, man. And I would say that was the second major stage of my awakening. I had the spiritual awakening first. So, I had a key mystical experience that grounded in the concept that consciousness is the foundation of reality. And then from there, because I knew from direct experience, that's a very solid grounding to move forward into exploring other areas. And then the next thing was the political awakening, if you want to call it that whole awakening to the manipulation of masses and how that plays out. So that happened through a David Icke book, actually as it happens. And that showed me, like you said, it is a very, if you have no idea about that stuff and then suddenly you're dropped into it, it's pretty disturbing. And, I felt pretty sick to the stomach at first, and I took a few weeks to put that book aside and integrate what I learned of it. I've stopped at the 99th page. I can still remember that. And, I just gave it a few weeks to to digest it and then come back and finish reading it. And that was like, okay, well, this is what we've got to work with.
Now, as far as like, reading these books and stuff like that, I feel like any type of spiritual material, for many of us, it's books, music is huge, movies, like having this awakening experience and then watching Star Wars or any of the Matrix and stuff like that. It really helps facilitate, again, you to ask the bigger questions and then to understand that, hey, this stuff could be real or is real. And then it's linked in with just the realms of possibilities because you've seen it in the movie and then you're experiencing similar things and then you're reading stuff in books that are speaking about similar threads that were in Star Wars and things like that. Like how do you tie the two together as far as reading some of these different philosophical books and what is possible to maybe experimenting with them or facilitating a spiritual encounter, or like how did it happen for you to like versus this is something I'm reading about that's deep and far out to like, wow, this is real and I can actually measure it or experience it in my day to day?
You dropped out a little bit there, but could you maybe repeat the question?
As far as like, reading these concepts in books and stuff like that. So as far as the David Icke book and the Holographic Universe and those books, like from like how did it jump off the page and become real for you? Did you have supernatural experiences? Was there something that you could try? Was there something that you could do as far as facilitating a supernatural experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the first thing that happened for me was, the book was followed by a very spontaneous, unplanned, unintentional mystical experience. I was just lying in bed. I was waiting to go to sleep, and there was just this sort of sudden shift. There was no transitional phase. It was just, ordinary sort of state of consciousness falling into, lower alpha, falling into theta sort of brainwaves. But instead of losing consciousness, I had the shift into, I'm a point of consciousness in an infinite field of consciousness now, and I am the universe, and the universe is me. And that was how the experience was translated, at a mental level. And the interesting thing about that was it gave me that inner knowing that this is the nature of reality at a baseline level. And as soon as I tried to mentally analyze it, that was what actually terminated the experience. So as soon as the left brain analysis kind of got involved, that was the end of it. But that grounded it. So from there, I was like, oh, okay, well, how do we get back there? So I started meditating. Back in, from the age of 20 to 22, I was attending a spiritualist church. I was doing the weekly trance mediumship group. I was doing meditation on my own at home. I was very much in that kind of energy and doing that kind of work. So there's consistency there, and I had a couple of pretty spectacular further mystical experiences that were quite deep, which again, just anchors it in. So yeah, there is obviously a systematic approach that can be really useful if you want to have that knowledge and that gnosis, and rather than leaving it at a mental conceptual level, you can actually be it and become it, which was very, very powerful.
So it sounds like you almost had like a lucid dream where you felt like a oneness in the dream state with all information, with everything. Like when you say I am the universe and the universe is me, like, is that what happened? Like you were going to sleep and you fell in this realm where you experienced that, and then you were able to kind of tap into it later at times, or how would you explain that a little bit more? Like when it started?
Yeah, I would say that I definitely wasn't having a dream, but it is possible to do very interesting things with consciousness. I mean, if you can send your body to sleep but keep your mind awake, then you can have these like out of body lucid dream type of experiences. And there's an argument to be made that a lucid dream is a version of an out of body experience, that they are related. I've had a couple of sort of minor out of body experiences which are totally unrelated to the mystical experiences. So yeah, what I've done is, I guess I've taken more the route of the mystic rather than the route of the occultist, and I've just become, my interest was more like in the infinite, and that undivided ground of reality, that fabric, that baseline where there is no differentiation. There is no subject object. There's just the one intelligence, the one awareness. So yeah, I would characterize it as a mystical experience as opposed to a dream state. Yeah, if you want to categorize, put things into their different categories. Yeah,
that's interesting. Like as far as like repeatability though, like how did you find that repeatability, or was it just spontaneous?
Yeah, the first time it happened, it was entirely spontaneous. So that was kind of like a little bit of a trigger point. And then after that, it was a matter of me just systematically being consistent with meditation. You know, it was something that I did most nights of the week. You know, most nights of the week I would lock myself. If I wasn't down at the church, you know, doing these group activities, I was on my own at home for maybe an hour to an hour and a half. You know, I was listening to a brainwave entrainment CD most of the time, so that was helpful. I'd lock myself in a dark room, so I was creating a kind of a sensory deprivation environment, and that really helps to you know, experience these very altered, lucid states of awareness. So yeah, that was kind of my approach for the first 2 years of my 20s. So it's definitely something that's repeatable, to have these deeper experiences, these deeper mystical states. I'm not saying it's necessarily easy, but it is available if you're willing to put in some consistent effort.
Yeah, that's what you know, I have a lot of people reaching out to me asking me how they can go deeper to experience all of this stuff, and everything that you're explaining as far as just like positioning yourself with spiritual material, with reading books on it. I always throw in listening to music and meditating, like those three things: reading spiritual materials and books, and listening to spiritual music. I mean, it was big for me, and spending time in meditation. And I think just like cultivating that as part of your daily life facilitates, you know, what I would call walking in the spirit, but having this connection there where you're having these dreams, you're having, what if you want to say, downloads, or these moments of epiphanies and things like that about the deeper matters about your soul, your psyche, oneness, and things like that. Is there and I know you have a bunch, I know you have programs and stuff available, like, is that something that you would tell people to start with though, as far as like, how do I go deeper, how do I facilitate these things? I'm interested in what you guys are talking about. I mean, obviously, again, with the programs, there's other like paths and like breath work and getting a little bit more detailed in those musics and meditations. But as far as a whole, what would you say as far as to facilitate that for somebody who's just not getting into some of this stuff?
Yeah, I think your approach is pretty logical. You know, it depends on the individual as well. My path was pretty haphazard. For a couple of years, I was disciplined. I think discipline is useful. I think, you know, like you've been saying, like imbibing the materials so that your consciousness is focused in it and resonating to that is definitely something that encourages your brain and your consciousness to shift into those other phases and other states naturally, which is doing every time you go to sleep anyway. You know, there's a lot of good research that shows that we are essentially having out-of-body experiences as part of going to sleep. So if you can train your mind to stay awake as you shift through those different brainwave stages into the deeper ones, then you'll have the lucid dreams, you'll have the out-of-body experiences, and you can train yourself to remember this stuff too. So it's just a matter of practice and discipline, I think, and staying focused on that kind of material. And the desire magnetizes those experiences. The intention magnetizes them to you. Like having an out-of-body experience is really predicated on really wanting to have one. So yeah, I mean, I kind of have just been more focused on embodying the truth, these truths that we've been immersing ourselves in, and living from that place and living intentionally, and being it, and sort of kind of trying to be the example of it, but in a way that's just unique to me, what I am. Like, I'm trying to just be me. I'm not trying to be anybody else, or follow anyone else's pattern or formula. So ultimately, everyone's duty and job, their responsibility to themselves, is to unfold that for themselves as that unique, you know, we're all that unique fractal, that unique snowflake. So you can only do you. You can only be you. I can only be me. And we can take all these different, you know, modalities and paths and trainings and things. And at the end of the day, the challenge is to actually become it and be it at the deepest level. So I try to facilitate that.
I know we've heard the quote, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And so you doing the inner work and listening to spiritual material, watching podcasts like this, like all of this stuff, whatever you focus on shows itself to you, I guess. And so what about like dealing with enlightened teachers or beings on the other side, some would call angels, that I feel like we're connected, whether it's again with God, some would call it God, the universe, this all-knowing, that shows itself to us in different ways, whether it is a teacher or an angel or an ET, or I'm channeling these light beings or whatever it is. Have you had those encounters with these deep levels of meditation where something comes and says hello, and then there even is repeatability with that kind of thing, a relationship, whether it's channeled material, or I channel these beings from Zeta Reticuli, or I channel Jesus, or whatever the case is? Have you had those type of experiences as well?
No, I've had that filtered out, really. I haven't meditated for quite a long time, actually. I've kind of translated, rather than feeling obligated to continue doing that as a sort of separate activity. I think my mindset became make your life a living meditation, make it an intentional exercise, so that, you're not wasting your time, and you're not living unintentionally and unconsciously. So for me, I have had some interesting sort of stuff happen. I mean, back in the day when I was doing the meditation pretty hardcore, some very interesting vision type experiences. I had a guy who looked like a wizard kind of show up, and he was sort of juggling fire or something. There was a very ethereal silver fish that glided past my face. I mean, I couldn't explain to you the purpose or meaning of the fish at all for the life of me. I mean, you can sit there and try and analyze the symbolism, but those it's like,
which is fun. It's part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all about analyzing this stuff for sure. But the experiences tend to be pretty variable in my experience, anyway. I mean, I know a lot of people who go down the road of, they become one of these sort of intuitive psychic channeler types, and they're always talking to their guides, always talking to their angels or whatever they call it or conceptualize it as. A lot of ET contact. I mean, I've been immersed in this stuff. I've been interested in it for a long time. But on a personal level, that level, those layers of it have kind of been almost filtered out. It's like I've kind of bypassed that stuff and gone to the core, which has kind of been my personality.
Yeah. That's so strange, and I love to dig into that with like the psyche and what is it, and again, showing itself to you, because I'm with you. Like, I've been digging into this stuff for a long time and have had amazing experiences that, I mean, where beings or things show up in this realm, and I still can't put my finger on, yes, that was a being from Zeta Reticuli again, like, and his name is Zoltan or something, and I can channel him. Like, a lot of it's iffy, but so for some of these people who come out and say, yes, I do channel him, he has a message for you, those kind of things, I question a lot of that stuff about what's going on in the psyche and kind of facilitating your own experience. And if you go into that with that notion and that experience, and you can create that guy, that guide who wants to come and say hello, and you create it in your mind, and he's given you information, and this is some world within a world that you created. And it's not to negate anybody's experience, it's just how much of a role that we play in this experience as well. Do you question a lot of that stuff? I mean, but again, like, even if you made him up and he comes to you every night, you're still getting the benefits of, if it is a being that lives on another planet, saying hello every night. Like, there's some interesting stuff to it when it comes to channeling. I did a whole like documentary teaching on it and the psyche and spirits, and as far as like dealing with the ventriloquist spirits and like letting your body become a ventriloquist for something to speak through. But I think it's usually deep within that person somewhere. You know, there's different states that we can get into where we unlock more information, whether it's pulling it from the conscious collective or even from our ancestral DNA. There's so much crazy stuff to it. But when it comes to creating this philosophy, like, I'm going to show you how to summon these beings from this planet by doing this meditation, what are some of the, what's some of the pitfalls or some of the realities to that kind of stuff that you've seen?
Yeah, I think you raise a few good points there. Like, people do this issue of unconsciously or even intentionally creating another entity, you know, a thought form entity, a toolpoidal being, is something that is very, very common. And also we do this on a collective level as well. And once it's created, it will tend to behave, at least initially, as it's programmed to, as it's expected to, in line with the kind of, you know, ideas that we have about this thing or this being. Then they can also take on their own kind of volition and intelligence and have their own kind of agenda, like, you know, lose interest in being obedient or whatever. So it's really a case by case thing, because there are so many possibilities in this infinite realm of possibility. So it's great. I mean, you know, endless amounts of research and fun to be had. And, you know, that issue of what is it that you're actually dealing with, what are you actually opening up to is a really good question. Because, I mean, a lot of people have an encounter or encounters, but they don't have the experience or the context or maybe the level of perception to show them what is it, like, the essence of this thing that I'm interacting with. Is this like an intelligent thought form that's responding to me as if it's a separate being, you know, like me? Or is it something, you know, that I've conjured up unconsciously? Is it something the collective consciousness has birthed? Is it an alien from outer space? You know, is it that a lot of the skill set isn't there? It's not developed to be able to discern things. And, you know, I've spoken to people who have massive experience with that kind of thing. And it's like, you know, these beings show up and they shower this person with love and light and make them feel really good. But for some strange reason, the person who's being showered with love and light gets into this massive depression. And it's like, the two don't add up. It's like, well, something's not right here. And then, you know, someone a bit more experienced comes in to help them and sort of see, well, what is this entity, you know, and they give a command, you know, show me what you actually are, you know. There's this like kind of cosmic universal law where if you demand to be, you know, told or informed what the entity actually is, then they have to tell you. And, you know, and then it turns out to be something, you know, that is operating completely in the against their interests, against their best interests. And maybe it's not showering you with love and light. Maybe it's harvesting your energy and making you feel really shitty. So, you know, you have to assess things on a case by case basis.
Yeah, that's the thing, man. Like, there's so many different, you know, things that people claim to experience and what's going on in their realm of belief. And I don't want to, like, you know, I definitely don't want to make fun of them. But some of it sounds so preposterous. You know, I mean, people messaging me telling me I am the reincarnation of the god Odin, and, you know, and we're supposed to be married, like, well, crazy stalkers, weird stuff. And I'm like, nah, I don't believe it. And they're like, yes, you are. You need to understand this. And they're like, I feel like, no, I think you need help. You know what I'm saying? So there is some weird stuff that kind of comes into play with that, or with so many other scenarios. And I know you've heard as many as I have, but in the back of my mind, it's like, not the Odin thing, but some of these far out people telling me that they're the Archangel Michael and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, what if they were right? Like, what if you die? What if you go to heaven or wherever you go after this place? And you're talking to God, and it's like, I sent you the Archangel Michael, but you didn't believe it was him. Some of the stuff that sounds preposterous is like, what if it's real? I mean, I hear so much. I mean, people emailing me telling me that they're my mother reincarnated from when I was a king, you know, just crazy stuff. And I'm like, what would that do to me if I believed it? You know what I'm saying? Like, what would that do to my psyche if I went around and I'm Odin? You know what I'm saying? And you need to respect me, and that messes with people's psyche. And so there is some pitfalls that people can fall into with dealing with spirits. And we say spirits, these become spirits because they're in essence. They're like, I'm carrying myself like Odin. Now everything I interact with is like Odin's picking up these things. And I've never seen this type of technology. Like, it gets kind of crazy, bro. Like, what are some of the pitfalls, and how do we stay clear of it? It's not to stay away from it or not have the conversation. That's not the answer. But what are some of the ways to avoid some of these weird psychoses and pitfalls and things?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Being grounded.
Be grounded. Don't be off with the fairies. Like, come back to your center and create your reality from the inside out. Not from the outside in. Like, I would suggest, or I would caution against, and this is a plague on this planet at this point, even at this point in time in the 21st century, where people create their personal reality by allowing a belief structure, a pre-existing belief structure, whatever it might be, to inform their worldview and their view of themselves, and whether it's original sin in Catholicism, Christianity, or whatever it might be. It's like you're imbibing something that somebody else has created here, and you're internalizing it. That's not your unique truth. That's not the truth about who you are. The truth about who you are can only come from inside of you. But if you're distracted by everything going on around you, and you're not listening to it, you're not tapping into your DNA, then you're gonna be blown around like a leaf in the wind. It's like you have no grounding, because everything outside of you is constantly shifting and changing, and you can be like, 1 minute you've got this belief system, the next minute that doesn't suit you, so emotionally you're driven away and you go over here and you become this other thing. And it's like all these labels and all this stuff, it's just externalizing you, and you have no foundation whatsoever. So a lot of these people, like, if the people who emailed you with like your Odin or whatever, I've had some pretty weird stuff too, man. And it's like, if you could look at, and I'm not saying this to be an asshole, but if you could look at those people's lives and the way that they function, not at least 99% of the time, you would not envy them in the state that their mind and their life is in. They're not coming from a stable place. And it's like it's essentially a mind virus. Like, if you think about the psychic terrain that we exist in, it's populated with massive amounts of thought forms that are up to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years old. And then you've got all the crap that we've been creating over the last couple hundred years. All this stuff exists on the thought form in the mental planes, the astral planes. So at any given moment, you can be influenced by anything, any garbage that exists psychically, cognitively, psychologically, can infiltrate you if you are vulnerable, if you're not grounded in yourself, if you're not protected. And stuff like, uncontrolled use of recreational drugs, alcoholism, all this kind of stuff, destabilizes the psyche, and it opens you up to these other intrusive energies. So, being sensible and looking after yourself and being healthy is just a foundational starting point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on, like, a lot of these people, they, it's nothing to envy, as far as their lifestyle or what they're doing. But some of them, are part of this is spiritual awakening. Like, so like when they have this awakening to consciousness and all is one, and there are enlightened beings out there and those kind of things, some of these people are like, you hear a lot of stories about people leaving Fortune 500 companies, and they were a CEO of this and that, and now they're a spiritual teacher, now they're a guru, now they're more fulfilled in life, they're helping people. But I know very, like, well-to-do people who have their stuff together, who, like, they have those mental breakdowns, and it's usually some type of spiritual psychosis. I am God, and I can give scenarios. I don't want to call, like, stuff out just because it's, they listen to the podcast and stuff, but I get a lot of, well-meaning to do people. Sometimes it's just and I've done some weird stuff. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's hard to, when you find out that reality is deeper and it's a little bit different than what we've been taught. Like, it's a mind mess. It'll mess you up. It'll shake you, man. When you find out that, your pastor has been lying to you, or your pastor has, got a kid tied up in the basement. You know what I'm saying? Just weird stuff that send people into these weird whirlwinds or whatever it can be. I mean, there's so many different things that can cause a spiritual awakening. I'll say that. And it's usually having your dichotomy shifted, like destroyed, right? Your worldview to like, boom, this is the real world. For so many people, it's scary. So for so many people, it's Alex Jones and the, Pizzagate stuff, that's happening right now. But it always comes back to, again, like you said, grounding and doing the inner work for yourself. But there are a lot of well-meaning to do people that fall into those pitfalls.
The thing is, one of the things is that stress, really intense stress, really intense psychological duress has a way of pressurizing and compressing the psyche and making it, it's like a bridge can only take so much weight on it before it eventually starts to crumble. Yeah. The psyche is the same, and the more that someone is compressed by these external pressures and stresses and things that whatever their past traumas and all that stuff, the more it leads them to a point where, if they don't have this like a constructive, integrative, awakening kind of experience, they'll have a disintegrative sort of experience. And a lot of people I've noticed, this has been a theme that I've noticed over the last few years in particular, is that has been playing out. That whole having a life breakdown, like a life crisis, is often followed by somebody believing that they've had an encounter with Jesus. And it's like, I don't care if you want to believe that this historical version of events based on the Bible that's your deal. But there's a clear pattern that the psychologically fragile, stressed out person is going to become open to these other influences, and the psyche, every spiritual awakening or journey or altered state is always occurring in the psyche. You're always going deeper into the psyche. There is nowhere else to go. It's all psychological. So, and that's not reductionist. I'm saying in the broadest possible sense. So everything exists within the psyche, the broad psyche of the cosmos, the universe, the multiverse. So you can never avoid that. You can never avoid psychological content. It's either going to be yours or it's going to be someone else's. It's going to be the collective's. And one of the strongest forces or entities in the collective consciousness at this point in time, based on 2,000 years of, or say 1,800 years of conditioning, is the Jesus Christ entity, the intelligence which operates probably as a pretty autonomous being at this point. And behaves as people would expect it to based on conditioning. So that's an example of what can happen when you are opened up to things that maybe you're not fully prepared for and don't know how to interpret. In near-death experiences, there are a lot of Westerners who have that conditioning, even if they're not believers. They don't have to be a believer, but they will still often have an experience where they see this being, this luminous being, and they interpret it later on, or even at the time, they interpret it as Jesus. But they also, I notice regularly, that they also don't have a developed perspective to be able to interpret the experience from a 40,000-foot view. And interestingly enough, the entity in these near-death experiences, to hone in on one point, never ever identifies itself as Jesus. It's always the subjective interpretation of the person having the experience. So what you'll find is, and this is, I get into this in a lot of detail in the book that I'm writing. It's book 2, where the forces of the psyche, the collective unconscious, will manifest themselves as these different avatars and archetypes based on what the individual needs or will understand. And it's really, to a large extent, it's as simple as that, because otherwise it would not be constructive or need serving. It's like we get what we're capable of grasping at the time, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's so deep. Because that's my story. I call myself a Christian mystic. My when everything was in shambles, it wasn't that. Because it works both ways, right? It's like there's a lot of people who like kind of go to Jesus but they end up going to religion, you know what I'm saying? And then that messes everything up. That, hey, you can't do that, you can't do this, can't be friends with that person, can't listen to this music. And so for that's like crumbling all of their stuff that they have built up. But for like a lot of people who are hurting or having a hard time with the psyche, like what Jesus represents is light. You know what I'm saying? It's like the highest form of love, and that's what I call it, like love that became a person for me. So if I pray or if I invoke that name, I can say the same thing. I call upon the highest form of love that exists in the universe right now. Or I can just say I call upon Jesus. Like for me and my psyche, like we have these players, these, you say avatars or archetypes, right, that embody this. And so Jesus would be the highest form of love. The devil is the epitome of darkness. And then there's entities and beings in between, angels and demons, right? And I and those are archetypes. They're essences, right? And so again, what you believe shows itself to you. And if you believe that to be true, and whether if that is true, like if it really is, if Jesus really is out, I don't care what you call it, as long, and just like AA, the AA program, we don't care what you call it. You just have to believe that there is a God or a creator or the universe that loves you, that you can draw power from, and so it's like when you have these systems and archetypes in place, they can help people, right? Because I'm drawing this love from, and then people say because it's an external source and you're not really getting it, you're going outside of yourself or whatever. But all religions have like essentially something similar, right? These different tenets and stuff. And whether it's through like some form of hero's journey, right? We have the archetypes and this story that we're all, playing out. I believe that if this civilization, if life as we know it is deleted and starts over, I believe that these stories are going to come back. It's just like whether it's in the soul of man or whether it is the truth. If Jesus and God are sitting there watching, I think it's a little bit more deeper, and we've given them names and titles. And I'm cool with that. It still works. That's the thing. Like it works. This is the name. Or it's Babaji. Babaji appears to me. Hey, it works, man. Babaji sending you light and love. Hey, it's working, bro. You're holding your stuff together. Zeta Reticuli beings come to you every 7 days, and they're giving you knowledge and downloads of the 7 stars. It's working. Like whatever it is, it's with the becoming the archetype and understanding that it works. So, I deal with a lot of spiritual far out, just understanding, trying to explain this stuff, and people will, they laugh at Christianity or how simple or whatever or dogmatic that Christianity is or has become, and we're deeper than spirituality, maybe get into Hinduism or Mayan culture or whatever, but it's the archetype. We have to pick one. Like you got to pick one. If not, you're going to be these people, hey man, I'm reincarnated as this. You got to have something that works. It's got to have practices. It's got to have something that helps you, have this routine, but I feel like what I do is a little bit of all of it. It's like if it's good, like I want to take the good stuff from every culture and get rid of the bad stuff. And maybe that is a form of my psychology of not wanting to deal with the darkness or bad. But if it works, it works. And I feel like that's even what this podcast is talking to people from every spectrum. And like I'm picking their brain to see what's working. Oh, that works? You did it and it worked? Yeah, and it brought tremendous peace. Okay, I can try it at least. And see if it works for me. And I think that that's how we progress with this narrative of what's working. Okay, I'm not necessarily telling you that it's Jesus, but that's the archetype. I can use those words, and this is what it means to me. It triggers things in my psyche that allows me to connect, and not just me, but it's the religion of the day for now. And people, they relate to it or draw away from it, especially in the hippie new age movement. Oh, Jesus and religion? No, my father was a pastor. For some people, it's a trigger. They don't want nothing to do with you when they hear, even I've been using the term God. They hate that term. But I'm like doing the inner work too. It's like, okay, why are you upset with that term? Why does God offend you? Why can't you use it? Oh, because God represents the patriarchy, whatever. And I'm like, okay, let's get to the bottom and really understand that. So when it's coming, all of religion and our spiritual practices, like I feel like you got to pick one. You do. When you join the Masons, you got to pick a religion. You can't come as just, hey, I'm just whatever. You have to pick a higher power. The Masons, AA, you got to have some type of, because they all have patriarchs. They all have archangels, and all of these people and things that represent different things. What do you feel about like that? Do you have one, or is it just open? I'm open too, but I understand like this isn't definite. I understand the power in my psyche and what it relates to for me and other people. What do you feel about the archetypes and having to pick one and having a spiritual practice? Because if not, then we're like, hey, this guy says 2 channel. This guy says don't channel. This guy says I'm talking to a demon. This guy says I'm talking to Jesus. And there's so much confusion and chaos when it comes to this stuff, which is part of the process, though.
Yeah, and it's a good question. It's a fair point, and it's, you know, like what you just articulated was somebody who is externalized and not centered in themselves. So, you know, for me, like it's an interesting discussion. Like,
is that a bad thing though? Is I guess what I'm getting to, because if it's working, you know what I'm saying?
Well, what, having like a belief structure?
Yeah, having a structure. Yeah, and in other players, archetypes. This is the Jesus which represents love. This is the devil. You know, this is, you know, Shiva that represents this, and this is, you know, Vishnu who represents that, and they're all representations of the one, of this, of consciousness, of love, of God, of death, of hatred, of bigotry. They have people that they help us to stay away from that because that represents this, you know?
Yeah, no, that's right. As long as you can understand that it is a representation, it is a symbol, it is something symbolic, and it represents a deeper force in the deeper layers of the psyche, your psyche, and the collective psyche, the universe's psyche. There's nothing wrong with having kind of, you know, I mean, that's what a belief structure does for someone, is ideally it stabilizes their psychology and it stabilizes their personality, and it offers, you know, a baseline framework that you can then develop the personality from within. And eventually what happens will be that maybe this life and maybe the afterlife and maybe, you know, some other so-called reincarnation, they'll let that go and they'll use other tools to explore themselves, to get to know themselves better. Whereas a lot of people fall into the trap of, you know, oh, Jesus and the devil, these are these literal beings, and they have this model of, you know, this really dualistic model, heaven and hell. If I'm a naughty boy, I'm going to hell. If I'm good, I'm going to heaven. Sit at the right hand of God and on the cloud and all this stuff. And it's like, you know, heaven is not a geographical location, and hell is not either. And, you know, if you can't understand this stuff at a slightly deeper level than face value, superficial appearances, then you just, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's just the way things are. Everyone's at their own level of understanding and development. The challenge that I like to challenge people to always push ahead and strive to go another step deeper, understand a little bit better, understand from a higher perspective. Because as you do that, you know, perspective changes everything. Perspective really is everything, you know, because ultimately the only model of reality that makes any sense is a panpsychist model. You know, in essence, the essence is the understanding that consciousness is the ground of reality. So therefore everything is possible, everything can be manifested, everything can be experienced. But what actually serves you in your internal, you know, maturation and growth as a self-realized being, you know, like, are you taking the archetype of Jesus and externalizing it and turning it into this deity that you worship and is, you know, greater than you, and he needs to save you from this concept of sin, which is completely made up? Or are you using it as, you know, like some people do, which is as a guide, a model for you to aspire to and to become more like that, to embody those traits and be more, you know, so-called Christ-like? That's useful. I mean, as long as you understand that it's a symbol, and that's something that it's fine to work with symbols. That's what we've been doing for hundreds of thousands of years, and nothing's really changed.
So, would you say that it's kind of like we're even with religion? I mean, it's obvious what's going on. It's like we've literalized the archetypes and the myths and the allegories, and they're powerful allegories. They're strong archetypes. They're amazing myths if you dissect them the right way and apply those principles to your life. So do you think that all of religion, whether it's Christianity or Hinduism or Islam or whatever, especially some of the more, you know what I'm saying, militant religions, do you think that that's where the pitfall is when we embody these as literal entities or tenets and things like that when it's a myth and allegory?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. When you literalize, you lose the essence of the message. You lose it completely. It's like you can read the Bible as a historical document, but if you do, you lose the whole mystical essence, which is the whole point of the document.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's really, it's education, and it's the trap for a lot of people is just that they don't have. It's like when you're not aware, and you're not aware that you're not aware, you're vulnerable to whatever. You're open, you're vulnerable, you can be manipulated. You might take on an idea, and then you turn your idea into a dogma. You turn your model of reality into a dogma that can never be questioned, it can never be altered, and can't be expanded on. And that's a really stultifying, limiting place to be. So I'm just someone who, I don't really have a belief structure. So I guess, I have to be transparent and say, I can't do it. Like for my purposes and the function I'm here to serve on the planet is to show people like the highest possible level of perspective that I can access. And then here it is, like, take what you want from this, and then, help people climb the mountain with me, as I'm climbing the mountain. And,
but I feel like I feel like you're talking about climbing a mountain. There's steps in climbing. When you go up a ladder or ascend, there's steps that say, hey, here's like, you wouldn't just pick them up and let them skip these steps. Like you have, whether it's the book or whether it's this, there are these things that again work for you, whether it is the meditation or whether, like, even those things are like these practices that we teach, and they become, I wouldn't say dogmatic, but it's a structure. It's something that's repeatable, right? And obviously Christianity or some of the other religions have done a better job at, or just a more of an ancient, when we were a more primitive people at saying that this is the way. But eventually there are these other archetypes or religions or ideas or new age or whatever that becomes like, these are the steps, don't do this, don't do that. I mean, even Crowley had his stuff, you know what I'm saying? All of these occultists and people who even explore deep realms of consciousness come back with some steps. Like, this is what you do and this is what you don't do, kind of thing, right? Like, I feel like that is still, like, even organically part of your structure, even because you do it every day. Like, listen, I don't want to skip this. I need to do this. This helps me ground. This helps me do this. I want to take ayahuasca. I want to do psilocybin. Like, these are part of our religious. I mean, there's literally religions and cults built upon these things, and they have tenets. You need a shaman. You need this. You don't question the shaman. He's going to help you get through it. You know what I'm saying? So these structures and things that we need it. I feel like we need it. And so, but you don't feel like you have any structure. It's just like,
I guess
even if it's your own that you made up, you know what I'm saying?
I have, well, like, for example, with the DNA activation stuff in the Evolve Yourself program, that's more about giving people a transformative experience. So there is a structure inside of that is designed to produce, a transformative experience, a healing experience, an evolutionary experience, a trigger, so that they don't have to come back and repeat that same level. So, maybe 5 months later, they come back and we do the second ceremony, which is a completely different thing, which takes you into a different phase of your journey. And then, I'm not giving someone homework, like, do this meditation, do that meditation, because I'm not doing it myself. My life is about embodying the truths that I have found.
But at the same time, if it worked for you, like, you are like mapping out what worked for you though, and like paying it forward, like, hey, this worked. Like, why wouldn't you tell them to try the Wim Hof method or whatever it is? You know what I'm saying? Because it worked for you and it's a beautiful practice. Am I looking too deep into it or what?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm not
I'm
sure.
just using an example. Wim Hof.
I rate the Wim Hof method, actually, just incidentally. It's really good. I do like certain things. Like, okay, so if you want to talk about like routines and that kind of stuff, like structural stuff.
Well, that's what the rituals are, the routines. You do it,
Yeah. Like for me, I've gotten into a little bit of a habit, like habits. Habits is really the key word, I think. Okay. Habits are, something that I look at as are you forming a habit that's going to support you and expand you, nourish you, or are you just running on habits unconsciously that don't serve any purpose? So I like to get up in the morning. Usually I'll do a little bit of movement just to loosen up, open the hips up, open the legs up, open the back up. I might go outside and I might do some 30 or 40 breaths standing in the sun, of Wim Hof breathing, just a quick session of breath work, just flood the system with oxygen, all this stuff. So, at the moment, like my early morning normally would look something like that, because that's the stuff that sort of sets me up to just feel good and functional to go into the rest of the day. And, you can structure your day however you want. Like I've had structure about how to, this block of time and this block of time and all that sort of stuff. But people find what works for them.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying too. Just like paying, like I don't want to say paying it forward, but just like whether it's mapping out or giving someone a plan, even like, because it's what's working. Again, like, hey, this is what I do, and I say that it's not as like being dogmatic or trying to force it on somebody, but people need structure, man. You know what I'm saying? Like look at like drug addicts and even prison and stuff like that. Like I know people they flourish in prison. They need to be told when to eat. They need to be told when to go to sleep. They need to be, so there's this, so that's where religion comes in. You need to be told how to pray. You need to be told how to commune. You need to be told how to go within, or at least taught, but some people told. And so I think that's where literally like religion means to bind or to hold back. And some people need restraints that they have never had passed down. They were never taught. They have never shown self-control. So some of these structures, as far as hey, do this in the morning, wake up, stare at the sun, you know what I'm saying, like take a couple breaths. And so like even just that, if you do it like 30 days straight, it becomes a religious routine. Even if it's not religion, it becomes a routine or ritual. My morning ritual is this: I get my coffee, I get my donut, I listen to the TruthSeekah podcast. Like what is it? You know what I'm saying? So I think it's healthy, especially when it is good stuff that's building you up and like encouraging you to seek, encouraging you to go within, encouraging you to ask the bigger questions, and then tying it back into consciousness. Like, listen, this isn't like, if you break these tenets, it's okay. There's more you can add or you can take away. Like these are things that help and stuff. And maybe I'm looking too deep into like, the structure and we just did an episode about the power of like ritual and nostalgia and like those kind of things that it helps people,
Yeah, it does. And that's fair. That's a fair thing to say too, because it really does. And there are, there are people at all sorts of places in their lives. And like you said, there are some people who need to be told when to eat and when to go to sleep. Yeah. Like that is true. That's not where I live. So it's hard for me to be mindful of that and think, to incorporate those kinds of people into my thinking. But there are people there are a lot of very troubled people out there. Like we live in a very traumatized civilization. So, you're right. Like rituals and habits and routines give us an anchorage point, a point of orientation to then organize ourselves and organize the psyche around that, and then go out from there. So if you intentionally create those rituals, intentionally choose those habits, it's a very empowering thing. So I definitely don't at all negate the power of habit, the power of routine, if you have created them intentionally, for sure. And, once you do, you internalize it. Once it's a habit, it's internalized, and it probably is invisible to you. You don't even realize you're doing it. Like me wanting to get up and stand in the sun and breathe is kind of like just what happens now. So these things are great. Like whatever it is that serves you to expand and deepen your self-awareness and to be a better version of you, like go for it. If you found something that's working, do it, and just be mindful of at a mental level, like being mindful of opportunities to continue expanding, continue seeking and understanding things at a deeper level, at a higher level.
That's good. I'm with it, man. And you talk about near-death experiences and stuff like that. And so I know you study it, you hear people's stories and stuff. As far as have you had that type of encounter with a near-death experience?
I've never had an NDE. No. I've had like the mystical sort of unharmed, non-traumatic stuff.
Well, that's the next question. Since you've never had it, are we facilitating them? coming near death on 5 grams or more of psilocybin or something like that. You know, it feels very similar to what they're talking about.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of people have said ketamine is in particular like a really close, a way to have a near-death experience, basically. So yeah, I think there's some really interesting things that you could do under appropriate conditions and circumstances. And you know, I definitely I've done high doses of mushrooms, and it's not. If you're listening to this out there, it's not a toy. Like, do not go into that lightly. And preferably go into it with someone who's experienced and who is not taking the mushrooms while you are, and do your homework so you know like what to expect if it's not so fun. Because going in again, it's like psychological amplifiers. It's like taking a humongous magnifying glass to your own psyche and being able to look back at it, and everything's turned up. You know, the volume's turned up to 11 on everything, and it's like if you're not having a great day or you're not in a great point in your life, then that experience you can be dropped into that. And it's like you're just stuck there until it's over. So it's not always the best thing ever. But if you do have a great experience, it's like beautiful, transcendent. You know, words can't even describe. I mean, the last session I had was so abstract. There was nothing that even vaguely resembled form of any sort whatsoever. It was hyper abstract, but it was absolutely phenomenal. So, you know, in the integrated period, in the aftermath, you can learn a lot about yourself if you take the time to think about it and reflect on it. They are definitely tools. I don't have a structure around using that stuff as such. I like microdosing, by the way.
Yeah.
I think microdosing is a really cool thing. So very small doses on a consistent basis. There's another habit for you guys. If you want habits and routine, that's an awesome one, microdoses.
Yeah. I feel like so with that, a lot of stuff we've been talking about, and you mentioned consciousness a lot and just, you know, going in, do you think that tools like psilocybin and those kind of things are just allowing you to explore your own consciousness in like a deeper way? Is all of that like within you and within the universe, like those kind of, that concept that it's like, it's not literally like the mushrooms like giving you access or a pass to these deeper states of consciousness that exist within you and without you at the same time? Or is it all within? Like, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and it's sort of semantics as well, because, you know, without is within. You know, if you understand the psyche is the only reality, and I mean that in the broadest sense. I don't mean the thing, you know, your brain and your skull. I mean the nature of all reality infinitely is consciousness. So that's the container. There is no container in a sense. It's like everything is theoretically possible. Everything manifests somewhere, in some place, somehow. And all that afterlife, the afterlife stuff we've been talking about, you know, I just want to be clear that to anyone listening, I'm not at all negating the fact that consciousness survives the death of the physical body. It's just that when you talk about in and out, it's like those terms don't really have any meaning at a certain threshold. It's kind of all the same. Ultimately, everything's contained in this transpersonal psyche. So you talked about having, you know, experiences on mushrooms, and you can have contact with you know, the spirits of deceased family members. I mean, that happens. That happened to my brother not long ago. You know, he saw or communicated, at least saw our grandfather, who we never actually had a chance to meet. He died when I was 11, and my brother was 3 years yet to be born. So he actually had that contact with him in his ayahuasca session. So there's a lot that you can do with altered states of consciousness. We're not trapped in our own personal little solipsistic bubbles. We are part of this integrated transpersonal field where, you know, I can connect with you telepathically. I can venture into the afterlife and meet my grandpa. You know, like all this stuff is available to us if we want to do it, for sure.
Now, with that, again, exploring the psyche, do you think that really was your grandfather, or was it just the essence or the hope of wanting to someday meet him that it's planted somewhere in the psyche? Or does it, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, right? Because it's still the same experience for the individual. You leave there with closure. You leave there with a hope of, you know, that we continue. I mean, there's so much that's imparted to you in your psyche that there is an afterlife. Even if there isn't, you being okay with death now because I know where we go when we die, and we're okay. There's so much that's imparted to you. But as far as it being really Grandpa, obviously, do you think it matters, or was it really him? What would you say to that?
I think the person having the experience has to be the one to answer, probably. We can only assess things based on the information and the evidence. So case by case is how I like to approach things, because it's like, it could well have been grandfather. Like that's entirely possible. It's a field of information and consciousness that gets interpreted by your sensory system in the form of a physical appearance, a humanoid looking being. And, that's just the way that it makes sense for that intelligence to present itself to our consciousness while we're still anchored in a human body. We're still tuned to the human body system, and that's what makes sense to us. So I think there's an intelligent interaction there if it is a real contact. And, there's a lot of afterlife research experiments with mediums and all sorts of things that indicates really strongly that we are capable of interacting with dead people. And it's a completely natural fact of life. So, yeah, absolutely, it could well have been that. And like I say, the survival of consciousness thing is very, very evidentially based. There's no reason to look at that as an article of religious faith or something that we've just plucked out of the air to make ourselves feel better. The evidence for it is there, and it's very strong.
Yeah, that's one of the things that even in, from some of the religious, there's Christian-based spiritual movement. So there's, I guess we would call some type of Christian mystic, if you will. And so they're really big on a lot of different studies or science, even dealing with the paranormal or sound or consciousness, if you will, like really proving some of the things that they've believed throughout antiquity, right? Because some of the stuff is just passed down throughout the Bible or whatever, and many other holy books. And so it's like explaining a lot of the stuff, whether it is the afterlife or whether it is the power of sound and vibration and words and things like that. So I love those experiments, and whenever science and spirituality collide and it proves some of these things. And for me, I think that the paranormal and the psychic realms and some of these things, I feel like they prove the existence of an afterlife, right? Of something that continues. Now that's even fun to explore, whether that's just some type of record or an echo that's just there playing over and over because it was a traumatic death when someone encounters a ghost or something, if you will. But just to explore that for some, I feel like there's this big, I've been listening to a lot of Mike Tyson lately on his podcast, and he talks a lot about many people just trying to make sense of death. And that's just what we're doing. We're trying to like prolong our death. I mean, the elite are literally trying to do it with all types of weird technologies and freezing their brains and pumping blood of young people, like taking their blood out and putting younger blood in them, like crazy far out stuff, putting machines in your head and becoming one with, robots and stuff like that. It's this inevitable escape of death. And maybe it's the fear of that consciousness dies versus the body dying. Like, I'm okay with my body dying, but consciousness dying is scary, And so religion and all of these things kind of help us cope with it. Even, again, the paranormal, the afterlife, the ayahuasca, the mushrooms. Hey, listen, I've been to where we're going when we die. I mean, I've said that, and I feel that, like, off of, which has something to do with our consciousness, with the all, with the one. It doesn't, look like it does here, but I feel like we're trying to explain or escape, or we're just biding time for that, big transition with death.
Yeah. A lot of it is.
And it's okay to identify that, though, right? I mean, it's not like you're weak for saying that you're still scared or have questions,
No, I mean, I've gone through phases of like different levels of certainty, different levels of confidence in that idea, even though I've got I've got all the mystical grounding, direct experience that you could possibly have or need, and all the research at an academic book learning kind of level. But I still look at that critically and question everything, all the conclusions that I've reached, all of the whole viewpoint. But, you know, it's interesting, you know, there's so many angles you can approach it from. And there's been a lot of some very, very interesting experiments done on afterlife research by Gary Schwartz. I do mention this in my second book, which I'm working on, where the experiments were done with mediums. And it was, you know, partly predicated on mediums being accurate and actually having the abilities that they think they have. But the key to the experiment was that the discarnate entity was actually essentially running it. They were the key. If there was no discarnate intelligent entity, you know, in the afterlife, whatever you want to call it, then the experiment could not have succeeded. So they were relying on this theoretical or postulated being who is not physical to actually get this experiment to work. And they succeeded on repeatedly to get these experiments with mediums and communication working. So they were like double-blinded, triple-blinded experiments where the experimenters didn't know what was happening. The mediums didn't know what was happening. It was all about, if these spirits are real, that's the only way this experiment is going to work, if they're real and can communicate intelligently and understand what we're doing and participate in it in a dynamic, adaptive kind of way, so that they're not just an echo of the past. They're not just this thing that's being replayed mindlessly. It is actually an intelligence there. So, yeah, I mean, one of many interesting strands of research that supports the idea that consciousness survives. And, you know, if you think of reality as a lucid dream or as a psychological state, like, people don't think of you and I sitting here talking, they don't think of this as the experience of a particular kind of consciousness. This is a state of consciousness that we can interact in, and a state of consciousness in which the physical body and physical reality seems real, appears to be real. You know, I remember Robert Monroe made a very interesting statement in one of his books, which was, you know, he was the Western pioneer of the out-of-body experience. And one of the things he said as a result of his travels out-of-body was that, you know, in order to have this experience that we are having in a body, you have to first, as an entity, you have to agree that time and space actually exist, and then kind of insert yourself into it, into the video game, and then play along as one of the characters. So it's, you know, it's just perspective.
Yeah. Well, I like the fact that you said that they were double blinded and placebos, just because, like, my mind immediately goes back to consciousness and creating your reality and creating that response that you wanted, like whether it is a tulpa, right, a created entity that you're like, we're trying to contact this entity, whether it is a deceased loved one, whether whoever. I mean, most of the time in those cases, I would say it was a deceased person. I've been in this question like years ago when I was real deep into the occult and doing a lot of practices and stuff like that, like a lot of weird meditations and stuff. I got into like the pendulum stuff of like holding the pendulum up, and the pendulum for me was, they said you needed an object close to you, so I would use my necklace. I would hold the necklace and I would ask questions, and so most of the time I feel like it would move. Like literally, I would hold it as still, and I'm trying to prove this to myself that is this real? Is this something I could trust? And so I would hold it as still as I could, and I would ask a question, and then it would go back and forth for no, in this way for yes and no, and it would move, and then it would stop after the question was done. Now that and for me it was into spirits controlling it. It was demons maybe, or whatever wanted to communicate. I don't know what it was, but now when I and there was even one experiment what I did, I would put some old Marilyn Manson music on that started off real slow and got really fast and really heavy. And I would ask it to move in a circle, and it would go be spinning really fast. And I would do it as a party trick. You know, we get everybody and say, hey man, I want to show y'all something. And we do it. And literally I'm holding it. I'm not doing it. And so but I guess back then it was like, okay, the spirit was communicating with me or whatever, or a spirit, whatever. But then now I'm like, like I kind of knew which way I wanted it to go in my mind. So now I'm looking at this as some type of telekinetic energy that I was controlling the whole time with my mind, even though I gave it a persona, if you will. I gave it an archetype as a demon or as a spirit or whatever to move this. Can you move this spirit? And then I seen the spirit moving it in my head, but it's like, was I really using my own telepathic energies to move it? Because when I would ask it yes or no, I think I would kind of maybe try to push it, maybe, I don't know, and yes or no. And then definitely when it's going in a circle, I'm envisioning it. Can you do it? Can you move it in a circle? Come on, move it in a circle. And I'm like communicating, and then it just starts. What about those type of things? What would you say? Can both be real at the same time? Could there be a reality where sometimes it was a demon and or entity, and other times it was me with my own telekinetic energy? What would you say to something like that?
Yeah, I think both possible. There was an interesting study done. It was quite detailed. Where, sorry, I'm just going to get rid of this thing off of the screen here. Excuse me for one sec, brother. Okay, yeah. So there was an experiment where a group of researchers got together. They were all into parapsychology, and they thought it would be a worthy experiment to try to create an entity using their intention and as a group, and to then see if they could get parapsychological phenomena to happen under controlled conditions. And they called their hypothetical entity Philip. And so, yeah, they did actually, through the group pumping their psychic energy into this idea, like this kind of like psychic nucleus, they managed to create physical effects. Like they got rapping on tables, they got various phenomena that would normally be viewed as, psychic, parapsychological and entities here. But in that case, that was a classic example of a group that had actually intentionally gone about creating their own entity out of nothing. So their own thought form, essentially, thought form being, which is something that we do, and we've always done it. As soon as you imagine something, it exists as a thought form, and if millions of people imagine it, then it exists as a much more powerful, stable thought form with a lot more sustenance behind it, and to the point where it can become autonomous even, and that's a potential for any thought form that gets created. So yeah, you just have to look at it case by case, because everything is possible virtually. Yeah,
that's interesting, man. Again, hence Jesus, or hence any entity that we've repeatedly went to. There had to be a time where that started, and there was just a group of guys like, "Hey, man, we need to make this thing. we need to make it real. I need you to give testimonies. I need you to make up stories about your encounters with this entity." Joseph Smith even. In my book, I talk about how like the majority of these so-called religions are birthed out of so-called angelic contact with, Muhammad in the cave and meeting an angel, and Joseph Smith meeting an angel, and even the New Testament, Paul is riding a freaking horse, and Jesus appears to him as light and knocks him off. And so it's like these angelic encounters that formed these religions, or these people to have some type of life-changing experience, whether they made them up, whether they made that up and it just became the thing, and they had other people with them and it just caught on, which could happen, which does happen for sure. Or if it was real, like if they really encountered these angels, is a very, very interesting thing to look into. But I mean, the more you say it, the more you believe it, it becomes real and takes a life of its own. I guess if we even look at religion, if Jesus like really existed, like he definitely didn't have in mind like what Christianity has become, and other people getting a hold of it evolved this thing and corrupted your tulpa, corrupted that spirit that was beautiful. Maybe to certain people. For some people, it's not corrupted. It's beautiful and they love it, but it's just, I guess the beauty in that case is in the eye of the beholder. Whether with your spirits, I talk about spirit contact all the time, trying to contact what spirits are in these houses, or Uncle so-and-so. Like most of the time when we look at our ancestors, and I love the terminology of our ancestors watching over us, my ancestors were drug addicts and pimps, man. They beat their wives. They were slave owners. Like these aren't, I don't feel like are good people that we need to be trying to reach out to get information about how to live life. You know what I'm saying? Like, so people are like, is there any spirits here? Like, what if that spirit was a pedophile that's in your house and you're like trying to reach out and channel these entities? And so again, there's some pitfalls and things when it comes to dealing with some of these energies, you know?
Absolutely. And you know, it's like I say, like with the example of the pedophile, like the more troubled humans are the ones who tend to remain earthbound. You know, they're the ones who are, especially the ones who are like pathologically criminal.
Hang around. All the movies are about them.
Yeah. Yeah, they hang around and they don't want to, they're not interested in like guidance or, you know, these, if you read, there's a book, you might have read it, 30 years, Carl Wickland, 30 Years with the Dead or something like that.
Yeah, somebody just talked about that there, on the last episode for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really interesting exchanges and passages in that because his wife was a medium and she would channel these spirits ostensibly, and they would share some very interesting things about some of the recalcitrant or criminal spirits who remained earthbound and didn't want their input, didn't want their guidance, didn't want to go into the afterlife, didn't want to go into the light and leave the earth plane. And, you know, they talked about dragging them away to be, you know, put into a kind of like a quarantine against their will because they were so disruptive and so unruly, they wouldn't listen. So it was like, well, you know, we can't have you running around creating chaos and running amok anymore. So we've got to, you know, put you in the naughty corner kind of thing until you sort of straighten yourself out. So, yeah, it's a menagerie out there.
Well, I think that's where the heaven and hell stuff comes from, you know, of this judgment that's looming. And I think I even have a hope for a judgment, right? Of like in the end, everything being righted wrongs, and whether that is a holding place and somewhere that you go to be purged for the wrong that you did, or you have to learn the lessons, and not like some eternal punishment, but like, you know, what do they say? Like, I've heard something like hell for Hitler would be like him having to apologize and see the damage that he caused and what he did, and having to talk to the people and stuff like that. Like, I mean, I know it's like fiction, but like the Apocalypse of Peter, like talks about, Peter goes into detail about the types of wickedness that you did on the earth in the afterlife. Like, those demons or entities will do that to you. If you were raping people, you're going to get raped by these grotesque demons. If you know, killed somebody or shot them, you're going to keep replaying that over and over, maybe until you serve out a sentence. I would hope that there would just be a time period to where, okay, you're released, you've learned your lesson, you've accepted love. I really do feel like love plays a huge role in this conscious collective thing about learning how to love others and ascending higher, right? You're talking about the lower level entities or the stuff that people have done that are earthbound. It's usually negative, hatred, you know, earth, like lower level stuff. And so it's this ascension process to accept love, to walk in forgiveness, to minister forgiveness and those things. I mean, I really feel like whatever supreme consciousness, if we call it God or whatever, that through those plant journeys and stuff, it's trying to teach us very similar experiences about love and about living in the moment and being in the now and understanding our that this is short. Like, this is, you know, 70 years if you're lucky kind of thing. Like, be in the now, be in the moment, taste chocolate, go swimming in the ocean, because where you're going, it's not that, you know what I'm saying? That kind of thing. And so that makes me scared of death too, honestly. Like, just with the small stuff, that I'm not going to be able to swim in the ocean no more. I'm not going to be able to tell my friends jokes anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like, just the little stuff that we take for granted that I love, that I enjoy, that it's not going to be here. At least we're going to exist differently, versus whether you believe in reincarnation and coming back or going to another realm that is totally different. Maybe it's somewhat similar, another Earth type planet, or, I mean, there's so many different theories and so many different things that can happen, but I don't think there's any place that's going to be quite like this existence, which I think I spent the majority of my life loathing, not majority now, I'm on the other side, but loathing and wanting to die and wanting to cause chaos and confusion and hurt people and corrupt it. Now I've like crafted a life that I enjoy and I love, and I can't wait to wake up and get started and have conversations like this and be with my family and go bike riding, and just the little small things that I love life so much has put me in this place to where, like, I don't want to lose it. So when we're talking about the elite who maybe are scared to lose their wealth or what they've achieved, they're trying to like live forever. I kind of feel that too. Like now that I've built a life that I love and I enjoy, I don't want to leave it. It's going to be sorrow. It's going to be sad too. I don't even coming back through reincarnation. I don't want to even do that. Like I don't want to come back with another family and new kids and a new wife or be a drunkard on the street. Like I don't want to experience those things because like I'm in the moment and I love this moment that I've created and I've been present in. It's a fear to lose that, to change any of that. Maybe it's even the stability there that I've created, that I'm scared to lose that, but it's inevitable. It is the fear of the inevitable that's going to happen. Like I'm going to have to say goodbye in this form anyway, but it's scary. I'm scared of it. I don't want to do it.
Man, death is the great equalizer. We're all going to our bodies are all going to end up dust one way or another. And that's just the way, that's the game we signed up for. This is the journey that we signed up for. And, we know in advance that these are the rules. And we know how it goes and how it plays out. And, if it's any consolation for anyone listening, I can say that, when people have near-death experiences, as an example, a lot of those people will tell you emphatically that moment of actually dying was the greatest thing that ever happened to them, the most amazing, the most beautiful. And, not just because they were often reconnected with loved ones, who'd passed already, but just because the sheer expansion and the beauty of that process of, because what the body does is it shrinks your consciousness, it reduces it, it limits it. So all of a sudden you get disconnected from this limiting factor, this filter. Take the filter away and your experience of reality becomes radically different. And those people, they rave about it. They can't wait. They can't wait to reach the other side again. So what we're not seeing here is the other side of the coin, which is the beauty of what is waiting for us on the other side of this. The other part of the journey, where the journey does continue, just is a little bit slightly different format.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's the hope. You know what I'm saying? The hope is that it continues, and even the consciousness thing is that like that you are in essence, that I'm not just blended with 17 people, or or going back to become a part of the one, which I really feel like that's going to be something similar. But to be even having a name and an identity on the other side, I want to believe it. I really don't. At the end of the day, like I feel like we're going to go back in. It's not going to continue on like this. Even like thoughts and stuff. And what scares me with this, I don't want to be a downer on this stuff, but these are just things for us to work through because other people have these thoughts too. The whole consciousness continuing on outside of the brain. When I look at Alzheimer's and I look at dementia and people who go, maybe 10 years or so at the end of their life and they don't remember anything or anyone. And just to think that when they die, they pop out like, oh, wow, I had to shake that off, man. That body, I couldn't talk for 10 years. I forgot everyone. I didn't know who you were. And that it comes back when you die. Like for me, it's hard to, it's hard to believe that they just pop back into who they were, kind of thing. I watched this documentary yesterday. It was a short interview with this family in Virginia who was like inbred, and most of them couldn't even talk. They're clicking and making dog noises and stuff, and like just to understand that their existence, and maybe when they pop back into consciousness that they'll get to kind of have a right brain. But what the hell is a right brain? Is it mine? Is my consciousness? Is it because they're not like me? That kind of thing, and just these questions,
Yeah. And, these are questions will probably haunt us to the day we die. This is it. Like, a lot of the literature talks about this veil of forgetting that we pass through in order to be in a body in the first place, and forget where we came from, forget our heritage and the rest of what we are, so that we can play this game in this role and do it, in earnest and mean it, and get the full experience from it. Because if we knew it was, a game, we wouldn't maybe take it as seriously. We wouldn't get the growth. We wouldn't get the full experience out of it. I definitely can say, after spending literally thousands of hours studying the question of what happens when you die, like what happens when consciousness does not have a brain to rely on anymore, is clearly that it continues in an enhanced state rather than being a limited one. And if you think about the people with Alzheimer's that you mentioned, consciousness operating through a broken tuning system, a broken physical medium is going to be impaired. But the body itself is a form of impairment in the sense of it's shrinking and contracting the natural state of consciousness. So if you eliminate that from the equation, the restoration of consciousness is instant. It's like, we see NDEs of people who have like birth defects, or injuries and what have you. And when they come out of their body, they have a self-image that is perfectly healed and perfectly whole, and there's like references in the Bible to this kind of thing. Like people interpret it as this is the spiritual body that they talk about. And, that's true to a point. That is the truth of what happens as far as, evidence is available to us to indicate. And there's quite a lot of it. So it's a really interesting journey. I've focused very heavily on that in the second book, which I'm finished. I'm in the process of working on. So hopefully I'll get it out early next year. Things go to plan.
That's awesome, man. Again, like, I think the paranormal, I think the supernatural, for me, that those fears, it really quiets those fears for me. It helps me understand those fears, that they're, it's legit. And I think that many people have different fears, and we have different ways to cope with it. For me, again, would be paranormal, spirituality to cope with that stuff and kind of reason through it. Most people, they just put it on the back burner and just try not to think about it. Like, so they feel like they're going to live forever. Most of us live life without even thinking about death. We just, this is how it's going to be forever. And then when someone dies or when someone, things change, or a spouse cheats on you and your situation changes or whatever, then they get thrown in this frenzy or this whirlwind. So I think that just being present, man, I think that again, the spirituality and the plant medicine really communicate those messages and wanting to step into manifestation, whether it's dealing with the psyche on how to tell yourself yes, and this is the game plan and we're going to stick with it. Dealing with manifestation deals with being in the present moment. And so that's one of the biggest keys that I think that it seems simple, but it's deep. You know what I'm saying? To remain present in the moment and those kind of things. And so, man, I really enjoyed talking with you, bro. You got some programs, you got books and a lot of cool stuff. Go ahead and plug your website, man. Let people know where they can check out your work. And you've got some free courses and stuff like that too, right? Some programs. Yeah,
thanks, man. Okay, so yeah, if you want to see the writing, the blog, that's brendandmurphy.com. And if people are interested in, if people are interested in the DNA activation stuff, the transformative experience, the evolutionary side of things, then I do have a free masterclass, which is, you can find that at evolveyourself.live. So that's a free masterclass, and that'll show you what it's all about, how it works, and what I'm doing with people. This month in July will be the last time that we run Evolve Yourself as it currently exists. So I definitely encourage people to get into it before Evolve Yourself is evolving. So I'm changing it up for the future. It may not be quite as accessible. And I'm not saying that as a marketing play. It actually will probably not be quite as accessible. So yeah, check out the free masterclass, check out the book. brendandmurphy.com is where you'll find my writing. And yeah, really enjoyed the chat, bro. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. Thanks again for coming on. Thanks for staying up late, waking up early to come on and to change your schedule, man, to talk with me. I really enjoyed it, bro. And I'll send you everything when it's up, man. Thanks again. Really enjoyed this conversation, bro.
Thanks, mate. You take it easy, and we'll chat again soon.
All right, brother. Many blessings.
Thanks, mate.
Shalom. Peace. Brendan Murphy, ladies and gentlemen. Good discussion. Open and honest. You know, a lot of people don't want to talk about death, man. But again, that's why we talk about the beauty. You know what I'm saying? The contrast of it all. And again, I have a lot of mystic friends, a lot of Christian mystic friends, and a lot of, Hindu type people who, their way to escape death is the fact that they think that they're going to live forever, like in this body. Like, not that your soul or your spirit continues forever. So I believe that, right? But that your body continues forever. Your persona, that it gets renewed. You're not growing older. You're growing younger. They're going to get younger. You're going to I don't know if some people believe that to be tied into breatharianism. You got to learn how to eat the sun and breathe and just not cut out food, that your food is killing you. So many different weird analogies, but the more I read the scriptures, man, the more I'm like, it's about like dying. Like it's trying to explain death to you and give you hope that Christ is defeated death. And so that I don't know why, but I always think about that. Y'all know I mention that a lot, and if it's a form of escapism, but again, like if it's helping you, then who am I to judge? Because then again, I've never died, so I don't know. You might be right. Might be wrong. The weird thing is I hope I'm wrong, for your sake. You know what I'm saying? But again, if you go to your grave and that's how you, it helped you become a better person. It helped you not live in fear of death like me. I like to talk about these things. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, TruthSeekah fears death. You're not supposed to fear death. Look, I fear a lot of stuff, man. There's healthy fears. Like if I didn't fear death, then I think that it wouldn't like cause me to be cautious about situations where you could die. You know what I'm saying? Protect your neck. Be careful. There's healthy fears out there, man. And so hold your stuff together. Whatever's helping you like make sense of all this stuff, then I'm for it. If it's a religious practice, if it's a spiritual practice, if it's plant medicine, if it's the lack thereof, I'm for it. I don't care. I like to talk about it. Let's talk about it. Ask the hard questions. And that's how we get to the answers, man. Getting to the bottom of it. Asking the deeper questions that you were told not to ask, or don't worry about that. God will tell you when you get to heaven. Like those are the questions you should be asking. They're in you for a reason. You've come to the right place. Hey, thanks for hanging out with us, man. I really enjoyed this podcast. Hope you did too. Again, one of the books that was mentioned, Brendan has his book, so make sure you go to his website, check out his stuff. I'll link it in the description. But another book that was mentioned twice in the last 2 podcasts, which is interesting. Got to pay attention to the synchronicities. 30 Years of the Dead, or 30 Years with the Dead, I think it is. Check that out. That's one I'm going to be putting into order very soon as well, just because it's coming up as a meme for me. Yesterday I ordered the Screw Tape letters, because that's one that's been coming up that I should have been read. And so I put that in yesterday. So that's going to be coming in. I'm going to check that one out. But yeah, if you got signs and synchronicities, the funny thing is people listening to this podcast, you have so many signs. You have so many synchronicities that are popping up for you. And they're things that I'm not even aware of, and they're words that have been spoken and things that have been said that you've been hearing for years, or maybe the last week, or maybe just today you've heard a phrase or a term several times. Pay attention to that. Pay attention to that. That is consciousness. That is God trying to get your attention. That is a breadcrumb from the Creator. I believe that. With that, I'm going to say peace and shalom. Thank you guys who all the names that are scrolling across the bottom. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're listening to this on the podcasting apps and you're supporting, man, thank you guys for all the support. There's no way I can name all of you guys. My the interesting thing, the beautiful thing is that the community and the supporters are at an all-time high. I'm trying to get to 200 supporters. I think we have 168 right now, 163 maybe, something like that. But and it's at the first of the month where usually everybody falls off, you know what I'm saying? But people are continuing. So thank you guys for believing in the work, riding with me, and supporting at any level of giving. You can support for $1 just to know that you're down, just to get the alerts, just to get some of the exclusive content, just to join us on the School of the Mystics. You know what I'm saying? And everybody who's supporting in other ways, trust me, I need those other ways just as much. I need your prayers. I need your support. I need your friendships. I need you to share this out. You know what I'm saying? Every way helps. And so I am very thankful for that. And so thank you guys for that. But if you'd like to support financially and get a bunch of really cool stuff, patreon.com/TruthSeekah. Those links are definitely in the descriptions for sure. Thank you guys for believing in the work. Got a lot of more exciting episodes planned for the next 3 months or so. Really cool guests coming on. Make sure you guys stick around. And thanks so much, guys. With that, I'm going to say peace and shalom. We'll do it again very soon. Peace, peace.